out in the Talmadge area out there. On the other side of the car dealership. Certainly if you don't address going back out to South State Street, that's going to create a traffic jam out there. We both have redevelopment agencies. I think there are opportunities here for partnerships and us working together that I certainly think are worth exploring, but not at this time.
Okay. Any, I'm sorry, Supervisor Smith.
Well, my concern is that, you know, almost everything has a fiscal consequence, and I see that this one certainly would, but I guess I'm a little concerned because I know recently there are a number of things that we've sort of rolled into the budget process, so it's becoming this sort of all-encompassing action, and you know, prior to Mr. Mitchell's tenure, we had a basic report on what the agreements were like, and we agreed that we needed more information on what the agreements were like. And I recall from our last discussion is that council had not been very involved with the process, and council was going to take a look at the concept of tax sharing and look at information and bring it back to the board. So in a sense, I don't know that either option is working real well. I mean, I don't know that sticking it into the budget process to me seems that it will get lost, and I'm not sure that that's the most appropriate avenue. On the other hand, you know, where is it going with the committee structure? I don't know. I was hoping that all of us would be more educated in tax sharing agreements, and we would start to have more dialogue about substantive components of what they're about, because they're probably going to come before us again in other areas in the county. So I was hoping to kind of get the bigger picture going before we jump to the specifics of Ukiah, but that hasn't happened either. So I don't know. I don't know what it. Do the committee members think that the committee ought to continue? I mean, I know you're having a request from the mayor, but you're not really stating a strong sense of where you think it should go. And you're Supervisor Delbar, you stated you felt like it should continue to meet, but Supervisor Wattenberg, I don't know.
No, I thank you for the query. I do continue to believe that is inherent that we come to this agreement so that a number of things can be addressed all the way down the line to annexations, et cetera. So I do believe we need to move in that direction to affirm our previous commitment and start the discussions with the CEO and how this all evolves into something that needs to be addressed on a grander scale. So I certainly want to continue with it. I wanted to hear an affirmation of the board that we needed to continue with it so that we didn't just waste time in staff,
right,
et cetera.
I think it's a question of prioritization, and given the limited resources right now in the executive office, I can see some challenges there. So,
yeah,
you know, I want it to be an efficient use of time, but, you know, I think if we're going to talk about development at the north end of town, we should also be talking about development at the south end of town. I mean, I think that the discussion is wide open. So I wouldn't say it should include or exclude anything. And there were references to other styles of agreements when we looked at the issue before, and I think those should be on the table as well. I mean, I think it should be an open book, but we need to figure out a form how we just get it going forward in the most efficient and cost-effective manner to continue the discussion. I'm just a little leery about it, just lumping it into the budget process.
Sure.
That's all.
And the reason I bring this forward is my belief that it needs to move forward, but with staffing shortages, other priorities, it's just kind of laid on the desk and not been addressed recently. And so I wanted to bring it back up to hear from the board that, with the exception of Supervisor Pinches, the board is still interested in working towards some kind of an agreement. And I'm hearing that direction, but I just needed to hear it in public so that the public hears it.
Well, Mr. Clearman, Mr. Chairman, you've clearly got my position straight.
Yes.
You know, if you look, it's all about how you view the future. You know, 30 years ago, when all of the sales tax was sucked into Ukiah, in the last 20 years when they changed the industrial zoning to commercial out there and brought in all the sales tax into Ukiah, probably it would have been a bit of benefit for the county to enter a tax sharing agreement. But now that it looks like for instance, in my district, theirs was just a recent new store opened up in Willits, and Covelo is building a new store, and Laytonville just got a new store. So I see that trend for the benefit of the county side. And I just don't see, and back to my basic philosophy, how can you, representing the rural district as mine, how can I support something to take away part of our tax dollars that may come back to my area in services? How can I be for partnering up with the city of Ukiah to where none of that benefit would come back to my area? Because whether you're talking about partnering up with a tax sharing agreement, you know, and helping things between Ukiah and the county, it's not going to help my district. And so I'm opposed to it because I see the future of things going on in Mendocino County. I'm really disappointed, as I said earlier, that we're not focusing on the loss of sales tax that we have. Not only for Ukiah, but for the county of Mendocino. I think that's where we need to be focusing on because it's considerable. We don't even have a legislative package going for that the state ought to change their rules on internet taxing. We don't even have nothing in our legislative agenda or asking our legislators to look into that, not alone change it. And I think that's a big mistake. I think the DMV is real lax on where they assign the sales tax revenue to. It's real easy for a person in Mendocino County to go across the border in Oregon and buy their equipment there. Matter of fact, if you call an equipment company in Oregon, they can tell you how to set it up so it's easily done. Those are things we ought to be addressing rather than fighting over the pennies we get.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Delbar?
Well, thank you. I understand Supervisor Pinch's arguments, and I can't say I disagree with them. But we also have a city that has expressed an interest, albeit with some prodding from Supervisor Wattenberger and I, to expand their boundaries and annex in some of the areas that need to receive urbanized services that the county may not be the best at delivering. In order for them to do that, a tax sharing agreement is necessary. It's the only way that LAFCO can approve it. So
why don't they just annex the parts then? Why do they worry about the tax sharing agreement? The city hasn't annexed any of the county in the last 40 years.
They can't until we have an agreement. That's the law.
That's the
we
problem.
have to have a tax sharing agreement in place so LAFCO can approve the annexations. So for the city to look at expanding its boundaries and annexing in those areas that are urbanized, we have to have the agreement. That's the impetus for the agreement. Now, like I stated earlier, the parameters have changed considerably since the last tentative agreement was developed. So there's a lot of discussions that need to occur. So I would encourage the board to support the committee and the staff, understanding the time constraints on everybody and the staff constraints, but let us continue to work on this. We may not come to an agreement. We've hit that roadblock in the past. But let us give that an effort so that if we do find something that works for both entities, the city of Ukiah can then look at those annexations. And from my perspective, those two go part and parcel. A tax sharing agreement with no annexation plan doesn't work for me either. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And one last comment. I certainly welcome and understand John's concern. But I'm a big believer in history. And over 50 years ago, the decision was made and the vote was taken to the biggest mistake in Mendocino County, and that was not to fund the water in Lake Mendocino's creation. The same argument, Supervisor, you just made, was made by 3 supervisors back then, that their districts would not benefit any way, shape, or form by the creation of Lake Mendocino. Boundaries have changed, etc. There's now parts of 3 districts within the benefit of Lake Mendocino's water. I just caution the discussion that you don't see a benefit today because 50 years down the road, the benefit